Okay, so in this video we are going to add a title screen and we are going to use the UI object and we will do a beginning introduction to how the UI works, and then that will lead into displaying high scores and things like that. So first thing, we're going to go up to File, New Scene. That should be familiar. We did that when we created the Game Over scene. Now what we're going to do, we go up to Game Object, we go to UI, and you've got one of two things you can do. If you create a new UI object, it will automatically create a canvas, or you can add that manually. As you can see, you can add that here. So we'll just add the object. We're going to do an image. One of the really annoying things about using the UI, at least I'm using in 2018.3. Maybe they've changed it in the newer version, but the UI is scaled very differently. So like in the lower left corner here, that would be like your entire play area, and this scales out just enormous. You'll see that when we get into the other levels, but for whatever reason, it doesn't do a nice clean overlay. It does this huge scaling out for some reason. In fact, you can see the light here, and the overhead light, like I said, is usually above the work area. So that border, and you can see how enormous this is. Okay, so that's the default image, which we're going to replace in a minute. So I just want to mention that the reason why you have a UI layer is because it is a 2D layer that ignores the camera. So in other words, if you have a 3D world, no matter how much you spin around and rotate the camera, this stays centered on the screen. So it ignores camera rotation, ignores all that. So it's an overlay. That's one of the reasons why I argue that if you're making a 2D game, you technically don't need the UI layer because everything ignores camera rotation. There's some other complications though, because say your camera pans left and right, you could have an issue there, but that's a separate discussion. So anyways, so there is the image object. So if we select on it, and there it says image source, so we need a sprite. So this is the image that I imported. Again, I just drew it in an external paint program. I use Anime Studio version 11, and then you just drag and drop the final image into the asset area. So you just click on it, and we have to make a quick change. So texture type, we want to change this to Sprite 2D UI, and we really don't have to make any changes other than that. And we do apply. And see how you can now see a checkerboard in the back? That tells you that the background is transparent. And that's just one of the things that paint programs support. They support having a transparent background. It also handles translucence because you can see like the blur motion behind QBert here. You can see that it's also somewhat translucent, but you'll see it easier when we put it on the screen here. So we just drag and drop that in. Oops, sorry. Let me try that again with the image selected. So we'll drag QBert there, and there we go. Now, clearly, completely the wrong scale. So let's do a few things. So we have the width and the height here. So we could do, say, width of 400. No, let's try it again. Let's try 900. That's better. And let's try height of 300. 400. It was kind of a rectangular image to begin with. That actually might look right. And so, like I said, you want to center this in the frame. Although for some reason, I'm not sure if it's because I have, when I'm running it in game mode, it's like in a free unlocked resolution that it doesn't line up quite right. But it will in the final build. So, let's just push that down a bit. So it's just supposed to be like him jumping off a couple of the blocks. Now we're going to add text. At the top is just going to say QBert. That could technically be part of your image too. I just didn't I figured I'd show you a couple examples of how to different objects that you could add to the UI. So UI, text, and this will just be in the text section here. We'll just do, I don't think the asterisk will mess it up. And now we do font, like 60. And then we'd have to change the size of the rectangle. So that, again, would be right here. So let's see, 900 by 300. There we go. Oh, that's way too big. But we need QBert to be bigger anyways. So we'll make this like a 90, 120, something like that. And yes, this is not really aesthetically appealing. I'm just, again, trying to demonstrate how to use certain objects. And in this case, there's really no reason to have to tighten up this border. You can, but in this particular instance, it really doesn't matter. Okay. So let's just run that. And there's, got your title, you got your image, and what we're going to do, we're going to add a line of text, probably at the bottom here, just so things aren't overlapping, that says, press enter to begin. So game object, again, UI, text, push this at the bottom, and let's make this a little bit bigger. And font. And it's going to definitely have to be wider and probably a little bit smaller of a font. Let's try like 48. And it's still kind of big. Good enough. So press. We'll use space. So we'll push that down a little bit. Okay, again, aesthetically it doesn't look great, but again, the idea is I'm just trying to show you how to use different UI objects. Now, when you have UI objects, particularly if you're using buttons, they allow for clicking, but this particular game really doesn't have any direct screen clicking that's necessary, so we really won't review that in this particular demo. Okay, so now what we're going to do, we are going to save this and we'll call it title screen. Let's now check for the pressing of the space button, and we'll use coding similar to what we used earlier to load the game over or to reload level 1. So we will go up to File, we will go to Build Settings, we will add the title screen, and in this case, we will put it at the top because, as I said, when this program gets executed, when you're testing it like this, whatever scene you're in, that's the scene it starts with. But when you execute, it is based on order here until some line of code says to jump around. So remember, the scene has to be in the build if you want to be able to navigate to it, which makes sense. So now what we're going to do, we're going to create a GM object. So game object, create empty, and again, GM, that's just for your benefit. It means nothing to Unity. And then we'll just right click, create C#, and we'll just call this start menu. Whatever you want to call it, start screen. And then we'll click on the GM object. We'll put that there. And then we'll double click. And basically all we're doing is looking for input of the space key. So if input dot get key down, I believe it's space in lowercase letters, and we have to, again, up here, let it know that we're using Unity Engine and scene management. And that unlocks or makes available the scene coding. So scene manager dot load scene, and it's level 1. Is it capital? Level 1 lowercase. Okay. Okay. So again, we are doing this in the update section because we want this to be checked with every frame. Input dot get key down, parenthesis, in quotes, the key that you're looking for, and then the squiggly brackets, and then what's being done, we're going to load level 1. Now let's test that, and then we'll do one more thing, at least for this scene. Actually, before I do that, let's make sure it's saved. I don't want anything weird to happen, just in case it crashes. And there we go. So now you have a title screen. But like I said, I want to add one more thing to it, because typically title screens have music. Not always, but they could. So what we're going to do is, on the GM object, we will give it an audio source this time, very similar to what we did in the last video. And I brought in this new file, again from Retro Sound Pack from Mululu. And what we'll do is we'll just drag and drop it here, and that automatically creates the audio source, automatically assigns the clip, and then this actually requires no coding. Remember how I mentioned about play on awake? Well, it defaults, which means as soon as the scene loads, as soon as this is instantiated, this will start to play. And then you just click on loop. And so you have the combination of this starting to play as soon as the scene starts, and when it reaches the end, it plays again. And then that will run this, and that should just about finish up the title screen. And we run it. And you should hear the drum beat playing in the background. No, it's not high-tech music or anything. The idea is, again, just for demonstrative purposes. Okay, so we know that that's working. We'll hit space. And that brings us to the main game. So you could do the same thing with the individual levels. So like with level 1, you could also attach an audio source with a clip to maybe the GM object within the level, and that way you have music playing in each level as well. So not going to bother showing that because it's identical to what we just did. So let's now move to level 1. Save that. And see what I mean about how you don't see your workspace? Well, I mean, this is the workspace, but you don't see the board. It's way the heck down there. Again, I have no idea why Unity insists on doing this. It's been like this since like version 5.4. But it's easy enough just to zoom back in. Okay, and I probably shouldn't bother lining this up too much because it's just going to be moved again when I add the UI to this layer. So, game object, UI, and we will do text. So you can see it there in the background way, way, way out there. So we're just going to click on Canvas. And this will be current score. So we're going to rename the text that. Now remember I said that for the most part order doesn't matter in the hierarchy. Within the canvas it does. So it probably won't be an issue here because we're not going to have a lot of images. We're probably just going to have regular score, maybe high score. We could put a player 2 there, but we really haven't added player 2 functionality. I suppose that could be one of the asks at the end of this series if you guys want to see how to do a second player for like couch co-op, that kind of thing. So it really doesn't matter what we put here because for the text, we're going to modify it with an attached script. Or to be more precise, what we're going to do, we have a script attached to the GM object, and we're just going to create a reference to the current score object. So let's go to our GameFlow script. And up here, we need to add using Unity Engine .ui. And just like scene management, that will make additional commands available. So public text, and we'll call it, want to be careful using the same verbiage. So your score and then txt at the end. Again, this is arbitrary. You don't have to do that. Again, it's just so when it pops up in the list, it tells me what I'm looking at, and that it's referencing out to a text object. So let's go back to Unity. So GM, and so there's the new reference. You just drag and put that there. And then it's just a matter of drilling down to that part of the component because you're drilling down. So this has the text component. So we want this to be checked on a regular basis. So we'll put this in the update section. So outside of the two ifs, you can either put it above or below. Doesn't matter. Everything in the update section will be executed anyways. So now what we have to do is first we have to say what object we're changing. So it's the your score text, and that's what I mean. I know I've said it before, but by seeing it in the list there, I know that that's the text object. So your score.text .text equals, and we will set this to, we have total score. Actually, yeah, let's do total score. Now we may have to set that to string. Yeah, it doesn't like that. So to string. Sometimes you have to convert numbers actual into a string for it to be displayed in the text. And I think that's all it's going to take because we created the text object. The text object is being modified by the GameFlow script, and we are putting the total score in there. I think that should do it. So now we just move around. There we go. It's really tiny. I'll fix that in a second, but there we go. We now have on-screen scoring. So actually, we want to do that here. So current score, and we'll make that, like I said, we have to make the size of the rectangle around it bigger. And let's see how like a 32 font looks. This is what I mean about it not looking like it's lining up correctly. But again, I think it's because I have a non-standard size running there. But just so it looks right in this particular demonstration, we'll move it. There you go. We have on-screen scoring. And you probably notice you don't hear the sound of him jumping. I muted the audio again since I didn't need to capture it for this video. Again, when I'm talking, I listen to music in the background, and that way it doesn't capture that. So let's stop here for this one because I mentioned that we want to do a local leaderboard, but that rolls in a whole new idea. Because if we want those high scores to persist even when you've shut off the game, then we need to create a save file, and I don't want to get into a big explanation about that. So this was pretty solid. So you've now seen an example of the UI, you've seen images in the UI, you've seen text in the UI, you've seen a couple ways that the text can be utilized. So I think that this is a good place to stop. Again, I hope you found this useful. And again, let me know if there's anything that you want to see at the end of the series. We're getting really close because we have a title screen, we have a level that will reload when you beat it. So technically you have an infinite amount of levels already. We have a live system, a score system, and an end screen. So technically you've got like 95% of a game. So we're getting really close to the end of this series, again, unless there's certain things that you guys want to see. So like I said, there'll be at least one more video. We'll handle the high score, a local leaderboard, not a network leaderboard. It's only local to your machine. And maybe we'll append one or two other minor things onto that because the only other functionality that I can think of that hasn't been added, there's a couple more monsters we haven't added, and we have not added the discs that are along the side of the board that you can jump up and then ride to the top. Those we're going to have to handle a little bit differently because since the original QBert was a cheat, it could have the disc go above the top and then drop them on it. Well, for us to do that, we'd actually have to have the disc move first along the side and then move laterally over the top. They could fake it because it was a 2D environment, can't fake it in the 3D environment. So we'll see if we add that in at the end. But again, we're getting really close because effectively you've got a fully functioning game here. Just really a few bells and whistles. So, okay. So have a good day.